Kill me, not my children, she begged on the ridge. The sheriff paid with his life, Clara. Whitmore's knees pressed into the dirt, rocks cutting through her dress. Sheriff Dane's gun barrel caught moonlight as it swung between her two children crouched behind the fallen oak. Tommy held his sister's hand so tight his knuckles showed white in the darkness. "You know why I'm here, Clara." Dane's voice carried the weight of 20 years wearing a badge. His 3 deputies flanked him, hands resting on their holsters. "We never took your cattle." Clara's words came out hoarse. "You know we didn't. Evidence says different." Dane pulled a piece of paper from his coat pocket. "Your brand on my missing steers." "That's a lie." "You calling me a liar?" Clara looked at her children. Tommy's face showed a cut from where they'd dragged him from the house. Little Sarah hadn't spoken since the men arrived. The silence stretched between them like a wire ready to snap. "Kill me," Clara whispered. "Not my children," Dane laughed, the sound echoing off the ridge. "Your whole family's trash that needs burning. They're innocent. Nobody's innocent in this county." Tommy stood up from behind the tree, 8 years old and already carrying his grandfather's stubborn streak. "Leave my mama alone." "Tommy, no." Clara tried to reach for him, but Dane's men held her arms. The sheriff's backhand caught Tommy across the jaw, spinning him to the ground. The boy's cry cut through the night air like broken glass. Clara's scream tore from her throat, raw, desperate. She fought against the hands holding her, watching blood run from her son's mouth into the dirt. "Please!" The word fell from her lips like a prayer. "They're innocent." Dane stepped closer, his boot grinding next to Tommy's face. "Your daddy thought he was innocent too. Look how that worked out. My father was a good man. Your father was a fool who stuck his nose where it didn't belong." Clara felt something break inside her chest. Not her heart, something deeper. Something that had been holding her together since the day they found her father's body at the bottom of Miller's Creek. "What do you want?" she asked. "What your daddy hid from me." Dane's voice dropped to a whisper. "The papers, the evidence, all of it." Behind the tree, Sarah started to cry. Soft, broken sounds that seemed to come from somewhere far away. Dane pulled back the hammer on his gun. The click echoed across the ridge like a death sentence. "Time's up, Clara." Tommy grabbed Sarah's hand and pulled her into the brush. Their footsteps crashed through the undergrowth until the sound faded into nothing. Clara knelt alone in the dirt circle, staring down Dane's gun barrel. "Smart boy," Dane said. "Now it's just us." He walked around her like a wolf circling prey. His boots crunched on dead leaves. The other deputies watched from the shadows, silent as tombstones. "This was never about cattle," Clara said. "No, it wasn't. What do you want?" "What your daddy took from me." Dane stopped in front of her. "The papers he hid before I put him in the ground." Clara's blood went cold. "My father drowned. Your father was the old sheriff. The one who thought justice meant something. It does. Not in my county." Dane crouched down until they were eye level. His breath smelled like whiskey and rot. "He found out about my business dealings. The missing girls. The money flowing through the county like a dirty river. You killed him. I protected what's mine." Dane stood back up. "Now you're going to tell me where he hid those files." Clara looked past him toward the tree line. 2 pairs of eyes glinted back from the darkness. Tommy and Sarah crouched behind a boulder, watching, waiting. Her children were learning what monsters looked like. "I don't know what you're talking about. Your daddy was smart, but he was a fool for thinking right and wrong mattered." Dane's voice got quieter, more dangerous. "He documented everything, names, dates, bank accounts. Where the bodies are buried. He never told me anything." "He told you something. Fathers always tell their daughters the important things." Clara remembered her father's last visit, how he'd held her hands and made her promise to take care of herself, how he'd kissed her forehead and whispered words she didn't understand then. He said the truth has a way of floating back up. "What's that mean?" "I don't know." Dane pressed the gun barrel against her forehead. Cold metal bit into her skin. "You'd better start remembering, Clara, because your children are watching. And I'd hate for them to see what happens to liars." Clara stood slowly, dirt clinging to her dress, blood on her split lip. The gun stayed trained on her as she brushed off her knees with shaking hands. "I remember now," she said. "Remember what?" "What my father meant." Clara looked toward the farmhouse, its dark windows like dead eyes. "The old well?" "Behind the house." Dane's face changed. "What about it?" "He used to take me there when I was small. Said truth has a way of floating back up. Move." Dane grabbed her arm and shoved her forward. "We're going." They walked through the tall grass, Dane's men following like shadows. The well sat in a clearing where nothing grew, covered by rotted boards that sagged under years of rain. Clara stopped at the edge and stared down into the blackness. "It's deep," she whispered. "How deep?" "Deep as a grave." Dane pushed her aside and pulled away the boards. They cracked and splintered in his hands. The smell that rose from below was old water and something else, something that made Clara's stomach turn. "It's down there?" he asked. "Everything's down there." Clara knelt beside the stone rim and looked into the darkness. Her reflection stared back from the black water, wavering like a ghost. She thought about her father bringing her here as a child, teaching her to drop stones and count the seconds before they hit bottom. Dane leaned over the edge, his flashlight beam cutting through the dark. "I don't see anything. You have to look deeper." As he bent further forward, Clara remembered her father's real final words. Not the ones about truth floating up, the ones he'd whispered in her ear the night before he died, when he'd held her close and made her promise to be strong. "Some wells ain't for drawing water, Clara, they're for drowning devils." Her heart hammered against her ribs. The evidence had never been in the well. Her father was too smart for that. He'd sewn it into the lining of his old coat, the heavy wool one that hung in her kitchen. The one Tommy had grabbed when they ran from the house, the one her son was wearing right now. Tommy emerged from the morning mist like something that had died and come back wrong. The boy who ran into the darkness was gone. In his place stood someone older, colder, carrying his grandfather's heavy wool coat in his arms. Clara saw her father's eyes staring back at her from her son's face, the same hard set to his jaw, the same way of holding his shoulders when he meant business. "Tommy," he didn't answer, just walked to the well and spread the coat on the ground. Papers spilled out from the torn lining, bank records, handwritten confessions, photographs of girls who should have been women by now. Dane stepped back from the well's edge. "Where did you get those?" "Grandpa sewed them in before you killed him." Tommy's voice carried no emotion. 8 years old and speaking like a man who'd seen too much. Clara knelt beside the documents. Names she recognized. Amounts of money that made her sick. Signatures from the governor's office. The corruption reached all the way to the capital. "Sarah Miller," she read from one of the files. "Disappeared June 1998. "She didn't disappear," Tommy said. "He buried her." Dane's hand moved toward his holster. "You don't know what you're talking about, boy. You killed my grandfather. Not a question. A statement of fact. Prove it." Tommy held up a letter. The sheriff's own handwriting, black ink on county letterhead. "Old man Whitmore knows too much. Handle it quietly." Clara felt the world tilt sideways. Her father hadn't drowned. He'd been murdered for trying to do what was right. "Give me that." Dane lunged for the paper. Tommy stepped back, clutching the evidence against his chest. "There's more. Lots more. I said give it to me." Dane's gun cleared leather, but Clara was faster. Her father had taught her to shoot before he taught her to read, back when she was smaller than Tommy was now. Her fingers closed around cold steel. Dane's service weapon sliding from his holster as smoothly as silk. The sheriff's hand found only empty air. His eyes went wide as Clara pointed his own gun at his chest. "My turn," she whispered. 3 shots echoed across the ridge. The sound rolled through the valley like thunder, then died into silence. Dane's men scattered like crows, their boots pounding against the earth as they disappeared into the tree line. They left their boss bleeding by the well, clutching his shoulder where Clara's first bullet had found its mark. Clara stood over him, the gun still smoking in her hand. She felt the weight of something else now. Her father's real badge, the one he'd worn when he still believed in justice. It had been hidden with the documents, wrapped in a cloth that smelled like his aftershave. Dane tried to crawl away from the well's edge, his blood making dark stains in the dirt. "Clara," he gasped. "Please, please what?" "I got a family. Kids of my own." Clara looked down at him, this man who had ruled her county through fear and violence. "So did the girls you killed. So did my father. I can make this right." "No, you can't." Tommy and Sarah emerged from behind the boulder where they'd been hiding. Clara saw them coming and felt her heart break. Her children had watched her become something terrible, something necessary but terrible all the same. She looked at their faces and saw what this moment was teaching them, that sometimes monsters only understand monster language, that good people die when evil people live. But she also saw something else. Her father's goodness still lived in their eyes, something worth preserving. "Turn around," she told them. "Don't watch." But Tommy didn't move. His 8-year-old face held the weight of a man who'd seen too much. "He deserves to fall. Tommy, he killed Grandpa. He was gonna kill us." Clara felt the truth of it settle in her bones. Some justice came from courtrooms and lawyers. Some came from badges and handcuffs. But some justice came from the ridge, from the dark places where the law couldn't reach. Dane's fingers scrabbled at the stone rim of the well. "Don't do this. There's gotta be another way." Clara thought about her father, floating face down in Miller's Creek, about Sarah Miller and all the other girls who'd never made it home, about the children who would sleep safer tonight if she did what needed doing. "There is another way," she said quietly. "But not for you." 3 days later, Clara sat in her father's old chair at the sheriff's office. The leather was cracked and worn smooth by 20 years of honest work. Her father's real badge caught the afternoon light, pinned to her chest where it belonged. The town council had voted unanimously. 12 old men who'd been waiting 2 decades for someone to stand up to Dane's corruption. They'd known what he was, but fear had kept them silent. Fear and the knowledge that good people who spoke up ended up floating in creeks. Clara stared at the wanted posters on the wall. Half the faces belonged to men who'd never see the inside of a courtroom. The documents Tommy found had brought down the county government from the bottom up. The governor himself was facing charges. But some justice would never come from judges and juries. Some faces would only find peace at the bottom of a well. Tommy entered carrying a cup of coffee, moving like an old man trapped in a boy's body. He set it on the desk without spilling a drop, his movements careful and precise. "You okay, baby?" "Are you?" he asked back. Clara touched her father's badge. The metal was warm from her body heat. "Your grandfather used to say justice is just a word until somebody bleeds for it. Did we do right, Mama?" Clara looked out the window at the ridge where it all started. Where it ended, the well was covered again, boards nailed tight. Some secrets were meant to stay buried. "We did what needed doing," she said. "Now we do better. What if more bad men come? Then we'll be ready." Clara pulled him close, felt his heartbeat against her ribs. "But we don't go looking for trouble. We just make sure trouble knows where to find us." Tommy nodded against her shoulder. "I miss Grandpa." "Me too, baby." "Me too." The afternoon light shifted, catching the badge at a different angle. For a moment, the shadows it cast on the wall looked like wings. Clara closed her eyes and felt her father's presence in the room, watching over them both. Proud of what they'd done, hopeful for what they'd become. Outside, the town was quiet, safe, the way it should be.